April the 28th, 1881. Lincoln, New Mexico Territory. Second floor of the county courthouse. Billy the Kid is sitting in a room at the end of the hall, shackled at the wrists and ankles, sentenced to hang in 15 days. Outside, someone is building the gallows. He can hear the hammering through the window. Deputy James Bell is with him. Deputy Bob Ollinger is across the street at the Utley Hotel, eating dinner with 5 other prisoners. Pat Garrett, the sheriff who captured him, is out of town. What happens in the next 90 seconds will leave 2 lawmen dead, one inside the building and one in the street below, and turn a convicted cattle rustler into the most famous outlaw in American history. Nobody stopped him. Nobody tried. And to understand why, you have to go back to the beginning. Not his beginning as an outlaw, his beginning as a child. But before we go further, consider subscribing to Shots Fired West. We go deep on the cases everyone else forgot. The boy who became Billy the Kid was born. Henry McCarty, most likely in September of 1859 in New York City. His family were Irish immigrants, poor and anonymous in a city full of poor and anonymous Irish families. His father was either dead or gone before Henry was old enough to remember him. His mother, Catherine McCarty, was the only stable thing in his life, and she was dying. Catherine had tuberculosis. In the 1860s and 1870s, the standard medical advice for consumptives was to go west, where the dry air might slow the disease. Catherine moved her boys through Indianapolis, then Wichita, then finally to Silver City in the southern mountains of New Mexico Territory. In 1873, she remarried a man named William Antrim. Antrim was a prospector and part-time bartender. By most accounts, he showed little interest in being a father. When Catherine died of tuberculosis in September of 1874, Henry was 14 years old. Antrim did not step in. He did not raise the boy. He moved on to the next mining camp and left Henry to figure out the rest on his own. A 14-year-old with no family, no money, and no protection in a territory where disputes over land and cattle were settled with firearms. That was the starting condition. Everything that followed grew out of that. Henry's first arrest came at 15. He stole laundry from a Chinese laundry in Silver City. Not a bank, not a horse, laundry. He was thrown in jail, and he escaped by climbing up through the chimney. He was already learning the lesson that would define his short life. Institutions would cage him. They would never protect him. If he wanted out, he would have to get himself out. He drifted, he stole. He worked odd jobs on ranches across southern New Mexico and Arizona. Along the way, he killed a man named Frank Windy Cahill in a saloon fight near Fort Grant, Arizona in August 1877. Cahill was a blacksmith and bully who had been physically tormenting Henry for weeks. Henry shot him during a scuffle. He was 17. He fled back across the territorial line into New Mexico, and he started using a new name, William H. Bonney. Billy. He landed in Lincoln County, and Lincoln County is where everything turned. Lincoln County in the late 1870s was not governed by law in any way a modern person would recognize. The county was controlled by a commercial monopoly run by Lawrence Murphy and James Dolan, known locally as the House. The House controlled the only general store in Lincoln, held the government beef contracts that supplied the nearby Mescalero Apache Reservation, and had the local sheriff, William Brady, on its payroll. If you wanted to buy supplies, sell cattle, or stay out of jail in Lincoln County, you went through the House. There was no second option. Then an Englishman named John Henry Tunstall opened a competing store. Tunstall was 24 years old, well-funded by his family back in London, and backed by a Lincoln County lawyer named Alexander McSween. Tunstall intended to break the Murphy and Dolan monopoly through legal commerce and political connections. He hired ranch hands to work his cattle operation on the Rio Feliz. One of those ranch hands was Billy. By every account that survives, Tunstall treated Billy with a respect the kid had never experienced from an adult man. He gave him a job, a horse, a decent saddle, and something close to a sense of belonging. Billy later said that Tunstall was the only man who ever treated him like a free-born human being. Whether that quote is exact or reconstructed by later writers, the sentiment is confirmed by everyone who knew them both. Tunstall was the closest thing to a father Billy ever had. On February 18, 1878, a posse organized by Sheriff Brady and acting under a disputed court order rode out to seize Tunstall's cattle. They found Tunstall on the road. What happened next was not a lawful arrest. They shot him off his horse. Then they shot his horse. Then they put a final bullet into the back of Tunstall's head as he lay on the ground. Billy was not present. He was riding ahead with other Tunstall hands and heard the shots from a distance. When the group rode back and found Tunstall's body in the road, Billy reportedly said almost nothing. He didn't need to. Everyone who knew him understood that something had locked into place behind his eyes that was never going to unlock. The men who killed Tunstall were never prosecuted. The sheriff who organized the posse was the same sheriff who served the house. The judge who issued the attachment order was a house ally. The system that murdered Tunstall was the same system that was supposed to investigate the murder. It did not investigate. It moved on. Billy did not move on. He joined a group that called themselves the Regulators. The Regulators included men who held legal deputizations from a justice of the peace named John Wilson, who had issued warrants for the arrest of Tunstall's killers. Whether those warrants carried genuine legal authority is a question historians still argue about. What is not in dispute is that the Regulators believed they were acting within the law, at least at first. On April 1, 1878, Billy and the Regulators ambushed and killed Sheriff William Brady and his deputy George Hindman on the main street of Lincoln. Brady was shot from behind an adobe wall. He died in the dirt in front of the Tunstall store. Whatever legal cover the Regulators had was gone after that. Killing a sheriff, even a corrupt one, crossed a line that no warrant could protect. The Lincoln County War escalated into a full-scale 5-day battle in the town of Lincoln in July 1878. Both sides barricaded themselves in buildings and exchanged fire across the street. The McSween house, where Billy and the Regulators were holed up, was set on fire. Alexander McSween was killed trying to escape the burning building. Billy made it out through the back in the darkness, running through gunfire. He survived. Most of the Regulators did not. After the battle, Territorial Governor Lew Wallace, the man who was simultaneously writing the novel Ben-Hur in the Palace of the Governors in Santa Fe, offered an amnesty proclamation. Billy, through intermediaries, reached out to Wallace directly. A meeting was arranged in secret. Billy offered to testify about the murders and corruption of the Lincoln County War in exchange for a full pardon. Wallace agreed. Billy kept his end. He allowed himself to be arrested as a show of good faith. He testified before a grand jury about the killings he had witnessed and the men responsible. He gave the territory what it asked for. Wallace did not keep his end. The pardon never came. Whether it was political cowardice, pressure from the Santa Fe ring, the network of lawyers and land speculators who effectively controlled New Mexico territorial politics, or simple indifference from a man who considered his literary career more important than his governorship, Lew Wallace let the promise evaporate. He left New Mexico in 1881 without ever issuing the pardon. He never publicly addressed why. Billy had trusted the system one final time. The system took his testimony and gave him nothing in return. After that, He was done cooperating with anyone who held a title or a badge. If this case is hitting different for you, go ahead and hit that like button. We cover stories like this every week on Shots Fired West. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now, April 28, 1881, the courthouse. Everything the audience now knows about Billy, about Tunstall's murder, about the broken pardon, about the Lincoln County War, is in the room with him. He is 21 years old. He has been sentenced to death for the murder of Sheriff Brady. The hanging date is May 13th. The gallows are under construction within earshot, and the two men guarding him could not be more different in how they treat their prisoner. James Bell was, by most surviving accounts, a fair and decent man. He treated Billy with basic respect. He played cards with him. He did not taunt him, did not threaten him, did not make the job personal. Bell was a deputy doing his work, and doing it without cruelty. Bob Ollinger was another kind of man entirely. Ollinger openly despised Billy. He carried a 10-gauge double-barreled shotgun loaded with buckshot, and he made a habit of showing it to the prisoner. He told Billy he hoped he would try to escape so that Ollinger could use it. He described what the shotgun would do to a human body at close range. He was not guarding a prisoner. He was savoring the countdown to an execution. On the afternoon of April 28th, Ollinger took the 5 other prisoners across the street to the Utley Hotel for their midday meal. Bell stayed behind with Billy. The courthouse was quiet, just the two of them. Bell escorted Billy, still shackled at the wrists and ankles, to the outhouse behind the building. On the way back up the interior staircase, Billy moved ahead of Bell by a few steps. What happened next is the most disputed 90 seconds in the history of the American West. One account holds that Billy, who had unusually small hands, slipped one wrist free of the loose-fitting shackle, turned, and grabbed Bell's holstered revolver before the deputy could react. Another account, supported by several Lincoln residents in the years after, holds that a sympathizer had hidden a pistol in the outhouse privy and that Billy retrieved it during the visit. A third version suggests someone had planted a gun at the top of the staircase behind a loose board. The truth is that nobody alive saw the moment clearly enough to settle it. What every account agrees on is the result. Billy had a gun. Bell turned. Billy fired. The bullet struck Bell. He stumbled down the stairs, staggered out the east door of the courthouse into the yard, and fell. He was dead within moments. James Bell, who had treated his prisoner with decency, was the first man to die in the escape. That fact does not soften. It does not explain itself away. Bell was doing his job. He had a life outside that staircase. And he lost it because a desperate man decided that his own freedom was worth more than Bell's life. Billy, still in leg irons, hobbled down the hallway to Pat Garrett's office. He knew the building. He knew where the weapons were kept. He found Bob Ollinger's 10-gauge shotgun, the same gun Ollinger had used to taunt him for weeks. He broke it open. Both barrels were loaded. He moved to the second-floor window on the south side of the building, the window that overlooked the street and the front of the Utley Hotel. Across the street, Ollinger heard the gunshot that killed Bell. He came running. Old man Godfrey Gauss, the courthouse handyman, was standing in the yard below. Ollinger called up to him, asking what had happened. Before Gauss could answer, Billy leaned out the window above. Multiple witnesses remembered what he said. "Hello, Bob." He fired both barrels. Ollinger dropped dead in the street. Billy reportedly looked down at the body and said something to the effect of, "You won't follow me around with that gun anymore." The accounts vary on the exact words, but the tone is consistent across all of them. It was not rage. It was settled. For the next hour, Billy stayed on the courthouse balcony, in full view of the town of Lincoln. He had Gauss bring him a prospector's pickaxe, and he worked on his leg shackles trying to break the chain. He could not get them fully off. The entire town knew what had happened. Not a single person attempted to stop him. Not a shopkeeper, not a rancher, not a passing rider. The town of Lincoln watched Billy the Kid break his chains on a balcony with 2 dead deputies in plain sight, and nobody moved. That silence was not cowardice. It was a verdict. Lincoln County knew what had been done to this kid. They knew about Tunstall. They knew about the broken pardon. They knew the law in that territory was not neutral. And whatever Billy was, he was not the only killer the courthouse had produced. Billy commandeered a horse. The animal, spooked by the dangling leg iron chain, bucked him off. He got back on. He rode out of Lincoln at a walk, heading north toward Fort Sumner. Still shackled, 2 men dead behind him. Patrick Floyd Jarvis Garrett was born in Chambers County, Alabama in 1850, the son of a plantation-owning family. That alone puts him on the opposite side of the American spectrum from Billy's immigrant poverty. The Civil War destroyed the Garrett family's wealth, and Pat drifted west as a young man, landing in Texas, where he worked as a cowboy and buffalo hunter on the Staked Plains. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall, lean, quiet, and calculating, where Billy was social, reckless, and loyal to a fault. Here is the detail that makes the story stranger than any dime novel could invent. Garrett and Billy knew each other before the chase. They had both spent time around Fort Sumner in the late 1870s. They drank in the same saloons. They gambled at the same tables. Some accounts say they were genuinely friendly. The frontier was a small world, and in that small world, the 2 men who would define each other's legacies had once sat across from each other over cards. The difference between them was not courage or intelligence. It was timing. Garrett saw which direction the territory was moving. The open range era was ending. The cattle barons and the Santa Fe Ring were consolidating their grip. The men with political connections were going to win, and the men without them were going to hang or disappear. Garrett chose the winning side. In 1880, he ran for sheriff of Lincoln County on a single platform. He would capture Billy the Kid. The political establishment backed him. He won. In December 1880, Garrett tracked Billy and a small group of companions to a stone building at Stinking Springs, east of Fort Sumner. After a standoff in the freezing cold, Billy surrendered. He was taken to Mesilla, tried for the murder of Sheriff Brady, convicted, and sentenced to hang. Garrett transported him back to Lincoln to await execution in the courthouse. Then, Garrett left town. He had business elsewhere, collecting taxes and purchasing supplies. He left Billy in the custody of Bell and Ollinger. And in his absence, Billy walked out. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, that the cases everyone else gave up on still matter, drop a like on this video. It helps more people find this channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. We have a lot more to cover. After the escape, Billy did not flee the territory. This is the part that baffles every historian who has studied his final months. He had contacts across the border in Old Mexico. He had friends who would have helped him disappear. He stayed. He went back to Fort Sumner, the community where he had roots, where he spoke Spanish with the Hispano families who had accepted him, where women like Paulita Maxwell and Celsa Gutierrez cared about him in ways the historical record only partly illuminates. He was warned to leave. He didn't. Whether it was stubbornness, exhaustion, love, or some deeper refusal to be driven from the only place that had ever felt like home, Billy stayed in the one place Garrett was certain to look. Garrett, meanwhile, was humiliated. The most high-profile prisoner in the territory had escaped from his own courthouse on his watch. The territorial newspapers were savage. His career depended on finding Billy again, and this time there would be no second capture. Everyone understood that. Through June and into July, Garrett gathered intelligence. He had John Poe, a detective working for the Cattlemen's Association, scouting the Fort Sumner area. He had informants in the community. Billy trusted his network of Hispano friends, and that trust was mostly justified. But in a community that small, word travels, and someone talked. On the night of July 14, 1881, Garrett rode into Fort Sumner with two deputies, Poe and Thomas Kip McKinney. It was close to midnight. Garrett had a specific destination in mind, the bedroom of Pete Maxwell. Pete Maxwell was the son of Lucian Maxwell, the man who had once owned the largest private land grant in the Western Hemisphere. Pete had inherited the old military post at Fort Sumner and the property around it. He was a prominent local figure, and he knew Billy's movements. Garrett went to Maxwell, not to arrest Billy, but to confirm that Billy was still in the area. Garrett entered the Maxwell house through a side door and sat down on the edge of Pete Maxwell's bed in the dark. Maxwell was in bed. Garrett began questioning him quietly. Poe and McKinney waited outside on the porch. While they sat in the darkness, Billy the Kid walked up to the Maxwell house. He had been staying nearby, possibly at the home of Celsa Gutierrez. He was barefoot. He had come to cut a piece of meat from a beef carcass hanging on the north porch. As he approached, he saw two men sitting on the porch, men he didn't recognize in the dark. It was Poe and McKinney. He drew a pistol and backed through the doorway into Maxwell's bedroom, asking in Spanish, "¿Quién es? ¿Quién es? Who is it? Who is it?" He was speaking to Maxwell. He did not know Garrett was in the room. Garrett recognized the voice. In the darkness, he drew his revolver and fired twice. The first bullet struck Billy the Kid just above the heart. The second shot went wide and hit the wall. Billy collapsed beside the bed. He was dead before anyone could reach him. He was 21 years old. Pat Garrett stepped out of the darkened bedroom and told Poe and McKinney that he had killed the kid. There was no arrest, no trial, no last words from the defendant. A 21-year-old was dead on the floor of a bedroom he had walked into barefoot, looking for something to eat. The most wanted man in New Mexico territory died not in a gunfight, but in a moment of confusion, killed by a man he had once shared a card table with in a room he never knew was dangerous. The coroner's inquest the following day was brief. A local jury ruled the killing justified. Billy's body was buried the next afternoon at the old military cemetery at Fort Sumner, alongside his friends Tom O'Folliard and Charlie Beaudry, who had been killed by Garrett's posse months earlier. The Hispano women of Fort Sumner dressed the body and placed candles around the coffin. The community mourned him as one of their own. Governor Lew Wallace, from his comfortable distance, said nothing. He was already preparing to leave for his next posting. He never addressed the broken pardon promise publicly. Not then, not ever. He went on to international literary fame for Ben-Hur and a diplomatic appointment to the Ottoman Empire. He treated his time in New Mexico as an interruption in a more important life. Pat Garrett collected a reward of $500 from the territory, and he had to fight to get it. The payment was delayed and disputed. The man who killed Billy the Kid had to petition the legislature for his bounty like a creditor chasing a delinquent account. Garrett served out one term as sheriff, then failed to win re-election. He spent the next 27 years drifting through a string of ventures that never quite worked. Ranching in the Texas Panhandle, a stint as a customs collector in El Paso, secured through political connections, land deals that went sideways. He was never again as important as he was on the night of July 14, 1881, and he knew it. On February 29, 1908, Pat Garrett was shot and killed on a lonely road outside Las Cruces, New Mexico. He was riding in a buggy with a man named Carl Adamson when he stopped to relieve himself by the side of the road. He was shot once in the back of the head and once in the chest. A rancher named Jesse Wayne Brazel confessed to the killing and claimed self-defense. He was acquitted. Many historians believe the actual shooter was Jim Miller, a known contract killer, and that the murder was arranged over a land dispute. The full truth was never established. The man who killed Billy the Kid died the same way Billy's patron, John Tunstall, had died. Shot down on a road from behind by men who had reasons the legal system never fully examined. The territory consumed them both. Now, the question this story has been building toward is not whether Billy the Kid was a good man. He was not. He killed James Bell, a decent deputy who treated him fairly. He killed others in circumstances that ranged from desperate to deliberate. He rustled cattle. He broke the law repeatedly and without particular remorse. The mythology of Billy the Kid requires you to forget James Bell, and the history does not allow it. But the question is also not whether he deserved to die in Pete Maxwell's bedroom. The question is what kind of system produces a Billy the Kid in the first place. John Tunstall was murdered by men with badges, and no one was prosecuted. The sheriff of Lincoln County was on a private payroll. The governor of the territory made a promise under his own authority and broke it without consequence. The courts, the warrants, the deputies, the judges were instruments of commercial power, not justice. Billy was born into poverty, orphaned by 14, failed by every institution that touched his life, and then sentenced to death by a legal system that was itself criminal. The Hispano families of Lincoln County and Fort Sumner understood this. That is why nobody in Lincoln tried to stop his escape. That is why the women of Fort Sumner dressed his body for burial and placed candles around his coffin. They were not celebrating an outlaw. They were mourning a young man their community had claimed in a territory that had given people like them no reason to trust the law. The Lincoln County Courthouse still stands. You can walk up the same staircase where James Bell was shot. Tour guides will point out marks in the wall they say are bullet holes from the escape, though whether those marks are authentic is one more question the territory could never answer straight. The building is ordinary from the outside. Most buildings where history happened are. In 2010, New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson publicly considered issuing a posthumous pardon to Billy the Kid, honoring the promise Lew Wallace had broken 129 years earlier. He ultimately declined, saying the historical record was too clouded. The pardon Wallace owed has never been granted. The promise remains broken. Billy the Kid has been the subject of more than 50 films, hundreds of books, and a century and a half of argument. He has been called a cold-blooded killer and a folk hero, a psychopath and a victim, a menace to civilization and a symbol of resistance against corrupt power. The truth is simpler and sadder than any of those versions. He was a 21-year-old kid who never had a home that lasted, who found one man who treated him with dignity and watched that man get shot off his horse, who trusted the governor of the territory and got nothing in return, and who died barefoot on a bedroom floor in the dark 3 months after walking out of a courthouse in broad daylight with the whole town watching. 2 men walked up that staircase. One of them had the keys. The other one walked out.